He thought he had planned the perfect romantic escape, a 7-day Caribbean cruise shrouded in secrecy and drenched in luxury. For Leonard Vance, it was the ultimate deception, a week with his beautiful young mistress, Tiffany, far from the prying eyes of his life back home, and miles away from his career-driven wife, Catherine. He'd spun a masterful tale of a mandatory corporate retreat in Miami, a lie as smooth as the expensive scotch in his hand. The champagne was chilled, the ocean beckoned, and his new life felt tantalizingly close. But as the magnificent vessel, the M.M. Serenity, pulled away from the port, a voice echoed through the ship's intercom, a voice that was cool, confident, and terrifyingly familiar. It was the voice of the ship's captain, and it was the voice of the wife he thought he'd left on shore. The air in the port of Miami was thick with a cocktail of salt, diesel, and anticipation. Leonard Vance adjusted his designer sunglasses, the Florida sun glinting off the ridiculously expensive watch on his wrist. It was a gift to himself, a celebratory token for a successful quarter, and, more importantly, for pulling this off. Beside him, Tiffany Monroe, all flowing sundress and wide-brimmed hat, squeezed his arm, her excitement a palpable, infectious buzz. "Oh, Leo, look at it. It's magnificent," she breathed, her eyes wide as she gazed up at the towering white hull of the MS Serenity. It wasn't just a ship. It was a floating city, a monument to leisure and luxury that promised to carry them away from everything mundane. "Only the best for you, my dear," Leo said, his voice a low, confident purr. He felt a surge of pride, of power. At 48, he was supposed to be settling into a comfortable, predictable middle age, but here he was, embarking on a clandestine adventure with a woman half his age who looked at him like he'd hung the moon. The lie had been surprisingly easy to construct. His wife, Catherine, was used to his business trips. Her own career was so demanding, so all-consuming, that his absences were often met with a distracted, "Okay, honey, be safe. Call me when you land." This time was no different. He'd packed his bag under the pretense of a week-long leadership conference for his financial firm, even printing a fake itinerary and leaving it on the kitchen counter for good measure. "I'll be in meetings most of the day, darling," he had told her over a hasty breakfast 2 days ago. "Probably spotty reception. Don't worry if you can't get through." Catherine, already dressed in a sharp, practical pantsuit, had just nodded, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Of course. Just focus on your work. I have the Gibraltar to Rotterdam route simulations to run all week anyway. It's going to be a long one." Her work. It was always her work. Captain Catherine Mercer. It still sounded strange to him sometimes, even after all these years. He'd been proud of her once. He'd bragged to his friends about his wife, who commanded massive container ships through treacherous waters. But pride had slowly curdled into resentment. Her long stints at sea, the weeks and sometimes months of an empty house, had carved a chasm between them. The woman he had married, full of laughter and warmth, had been replaced by a hardened professional who spoke in terms of nautical miles and barometric pressure. The sea was her true spouse. He was merely a port of call. Tiffany was the antidote to all of that. She was an intern at his firm, bright-eyed and ambitious, and she saw him not as the husband of an absentee captain, but as Leonard Vance, the brilliant senior partner. She hung on his every word, laughed at his tired jokes, and made him feel like the man he had always wanted to be. The affair had started with furtive lunches and escalated to late nights at the office, a fire that thawed the lonely chill of his life. This cruise was his grand gesture. He was testing the waters, literally and figuratively, for a new life with her. He'd booked the Grand Astoria suite, a sprawling space with a private balcony, a jacuzzi tub, and a complimentary bottle of Dom Perignon waiting on ice. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, a porter in a crisp white uniform asked, taking their luggage. Leo didn't flinch at the name. He had booked it under his own, a foolish, arrogant move. But he'd reasoned that Catherine would never in a million years have reason to check a cruise ship's passenger manifest. "That's us," he said smoothly, slipping the man a $50 bill. As they walked up the gangway, the sheer scale of the ship's interior hit them. A grand atrium soared 10 decks high, with glass elevators gliding silently up and down its sides. A string quartet was playing softly on a mezzanine level, the elegant notes weaving through the excited chatter of the embarking passengers. It smelled of new carpet, expensive perfume, and limitless possibility. "Leo, this is unreal," Tiffany whispered, clutching his arm tighter. Their suite was even better than the pictures online. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass doors that led to their private balcony. The bed was enormous, piled high with plush pillows, and there, in a silver bucket, was the promised champagne. Leo popped the cork with a flourish, the sound echoing his own bubbling sense of triumph. He poured 2 crystal flutes, handing one to Tiffany. "A toast," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "To new beginnings. To us." She smiled, a dazzling, intoxicating smile that made him feel 20 years younger. "To us." They drank the champagne on the balcony as the ship's horn blared, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the deck. They watched the Miami skyline recede, the buildings shrinking into a distant postcard. For the first time in years, Leo felt utterly, completely free. He was anonymous here, just another wealthy man spoiling his beautiful wife. The guilt that had been a constant, low-level hum in the back of his mind finally fell silent, drowned out by the rhythmic churn of the ocean and Tiffany's delighted laughter. He had thought of everything. He had covered every track. For the next 7 days, Catherine didn't exist. His marriage, his responsibilities, his quiet, lonely house, it all belonged to a man he had left behind on the shore. Here, on the vast, unforgiving ocean, he was a new man, and his future was as bright and boundless as the horizon in front of them. While Leonard Vance toasted to his new life, 500 feet forward and 14 decks above, Captain Catherine Mercer stood on the bridge of the MS Serenity, her world a quiet, controlled symphony of technology and human expertise. The expansive space was a cocoon of calm efficiency, the panoramic windows offering an unobstructed 180-degree view of the sea. The setting sun painted the sky in strokes of orange and violet, but Catherine's focus was on the myriad of screens displaying charts, radar data, and engine telemetry. Her uniform was immaculate, a crisp white shirt with gold-striped epaulets denoting her rank, navy trousers, and polished black shoes. At 45, her face was framed by dark hair, pulled back in a severe but practical bun, with a few stray strands of silver at her temples. Her blue eyes, accustomed to scanning distant horizons, held a steady, unwavering authority. She moved with an economy of motion, her presence filling the bridge with a quiet confidence that her crew respected and relied upon. "Heading 090, Commander," she said, her voice calm and even, cutting through the low electronic hum. 090, Captain, her first officer, Ava Rostova, confirmed from the navigation console. Ava, a sharp and loyal officer in her late 30s, had served under Catherine for 3 years. She knew her captain's moods better than anyone, recognizing the subtle shift in her posture or the slight tightening of her jaw that betrayed any inner turmoil. For Catherine, the bridge was a sanctuary. The sea was demanding, unforgiving, but it was also honest. It held no deceptions, no hidden agendas. You respected its power, you understood its rules, and in return, it offered a profound sense of purpose. It was a stark contrast to her life on land, which had become a sea of unspoken resentments and widening emotional distances. Her marriage to Leo had once been her anchor. He was charming, ambitious, and had seemed to understand her passion for her career. But over the years, his understanding had frayed into impatience. Her promotions, which should have been moments of shared celebration, became sources of friction. "Another 3 months away, Kate? When do I get to have a wife?" he'd ask, the question laced with a guilt she refused to carry. She had tried to explain that this wasn't a job, it was a calling. She was one of a handful of women in the world to command a vessel of this class. It was a legacy she was building, not just for herself, but for the women who would come after her. He just couldn't see it. Last night, she had received the final passenger manifest. It was a routine part of her pre-departure duties, a document she usually scanned with professional detachment. But one name had leapt off the page, a gut punch that had stolen the air from her lungs. Vance, Leonard, Suite 1401, Grand Astoria Suite. She had stared at it for a full minute, her mind refusing to process the information. It had to be a mistake, a coincidence, another Leonard Vance. But the address listed for billing was their home address. The emergency contact was listed as Catherine Mercer, her own name. The blood had drained from her face. His leadership conference in Miami, his vague answers about the hotel, the way he'd avoided her eyes when he kissed her goodbye. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. He wasn't just cheating. He was doing it with an audacious, insulting arrogance, bringing his affair into her world, onto her ship. He was so convinced of her distance, so certain of her obliviousness, that he believed he could hide in plain sight. For a moment, a wave of pure, hot rage had washed over her. She'd imagined storming down to Suite 1401 and confronting them, the righteous, wronged wife. She'd pictured the shock on his face, the shame, but the rage had subsided as quickly as it came, replaced by something colder, harder, and far more familiar. Control. She was Captain Catherine Mercer. She did not create scenes. She commanded them. This was her ship, her domain. He wasn't a cheating husband here. He was a passenger, and he would abide by her rules. Now, as the ship settled into its course, she maintained an unreadable expression. Only Ava noticed the almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders. "Everything all right, Captain?" Ava asked quietly, her gaze flickering from the radar to Catherine's face. Catherine's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "Perfectly fine, Commander. Just ensuring a smooth departure." An hour later, as the last vestiges of daylight disappeared and the ship became an island of glittering light on an endless dark sea, the time came for the captain's welcome announcement. It was a standard procedure, a message to be piped into every suite and public area, welcoming the 3,000 passengers aboard. Catherine picked up the broadcast microphone, her knuckles white. She took a slow, steadying breath, not as a wife preparing for a confrontation, but as a captain assuming command. She pressed the button. A soft chime echoed throughout the vessel, silencing the ambient music in the lounges and suites. In Suite 1401, Leo and Tiffany were laughing, a half-empty bottle of champagne between them. Tiffany was recounting a story about a clumsy colleague, and Leo was listening, feeling relaxed and happy. The chime sounded, and he paused, a glass halfway to his lips. Then the voice came. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome aboard the MS Serenity. This is your captain, Catherine Mercer, speaking." The crystal flute slipped from Leo's fingers, shattering on the plush carpet and splashing champagne across his trousers. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, horrified pallor. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It wasn't possible. It was a hallucination, a cruel, bizarre joke. Tiffany stopped laughing, her brow furrowed in confusion at his reaction. "Leo, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." But Leo couldn't answer. He was frozen, his eyes wide with terror, listening to the voice that had haunted his quiet, lonely nights, now echoing from the ceiling speaker. It was a voice he knew better than his own, but it was different, imbued with an unshakable authority and a cold, professional cadence he had never heard before. "We have just cleared the port of Miami and are now on a direct course for our first port of call, Phillipsburg, St. Martin. Our current speed is 22 knots, with calm seas and clear skies ahead. I, along with my exceptional crew, are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe, memorable, and luxurious journey with us. On behalf of everyone here, I wish you a wonderful evening and a fantastic voyage." The broadcast ended. The soft lounge music faded back in. But for Leonard Vance, the silence that followed was deafening. The gilded cage he had so carefully constructed had just slammed shut, and he realized, with a dawning, sickening horror, that his wife wasn't just the ship's captain. She was his jailer. Panic seized Leo in its icy grip. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. He stared at the speaker on the ceiling, as if it were a malevolent eye that had just pronounced his doom. Catherine. Captain Catherine Mercer. His Catherine. "Leo, what is it?" Tiffany demanded, her voice sharp with a mixture of concern and irritation. She knelt to pick up the broken shards of the champagne flute, her perfect mood shattered. "You're white as a sheet. Who is Catherine Mercer?" Leo's mind was a maelstrom of denial and terror. He couldn't form a coherent thought. How? Why? She was supposed to be running simulations for a route in a different hemisphere. She had never once captained a commercial cruise liner. Her entire career had been in cargo and freight. Had she lied to him? Was this some elaborate, twisted trap she had laid? She's my wife," he finally choked out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Tiffany froze, a piece of broken glass in her hand. Her perfectly made-up face contorted, first in disbelief, then in dawning comprehension, and finally in pure fury. "Your wife?" she hissed, standing up slowly. "Your wife is the captain of this ship. Are you kidding me, Leo? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "I didn't know. I swear I had no idea," he stammered, scrambling for an explanation that didn't exist. "She pilots container ships. This doesn't make any sense." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "She must have changed assignments. A last-minute transfer. A last-minute transfer that you conveniently failed to mention?" Tiffany's voice rose, her initial adoration for him evaporating like sea spray. "You told me she was practically a ghost. You told me she was halfway across the world. Instead, she's flying the plane we're on." "It's a ship, not a plane," he said weakly, the correction earning him a venomous glare. "Don't be an idiot, Leo. You know what I mean. We are trapped on a floating hotel for 7 days with your wife in charge." She began pacing the luxurious suite, her movements agitated and sharp like a caged animal. "What are we going to do? Does she know we're here?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Of course she knew. His name on the manifest, the suite number, the shared surname he had so arrogantly used. She knew everything. That welcome announcement wasn't a coincidence. It was a declaration, a shot across the bow. "We have to get off," Leo said, a desperate plan forming. "At the next port, we'll just get off." "The next port is in 2 days, Leo," Tiffany shrieked. "What do we do until then? Hide in this room, order room service for 48 hours straight, and pray she doesn't come knocking on the door?" The thought of Catherine appearing at their door, her face a mask of cold fury, sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. He felt trapped, exposed, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. On land, he held the cards. He was the successful partner, the one with the money and the plan. Here, he was just a passenger. And she was the captain. She held absolute authority. His mind raced. He had to think. He had to regain control. Okay, calm down," he said, trying to soothe her and himself. "Let's just be discreet. It's a huge ship. There are 3,000 people on board. We can blend in. She's on the bridge. She's busy. She won't have time to seek us out." Even as he said it, he knew how foolish it sounded. Catherine missed nothing. Her attention to detail was legendary. She would know their dinner reservations, their show tickets, every single charge they made to their room. They were rats in a maze of her own design. The first major test was just hours away, the captain's welcome gala and cocktail reception. It was a formal event, a chance for the ship's senior officers to mingle with the passengers. Attendance wasn't mandatory, but its absence would be noted. Hiding would be an admission of guilt. Going would be walking directly into the lion's den. "We have to go to the gala," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Tiffany stared at him, as if he'd lost his mind. "Absolutely not. I am not parading myself in front of your wife like some cheap prize you've won." "We have no choice," he insisted, his desperation making him bold. "If we don't show up, it looks like we're hiding. It's suspicious. We have to act normal. We'll go, have one drink, stay in the back, and leave. We'll pretend we didn't hear the announcement properly, that we thought she said Catherine Mercer, but it couldn't possibly be her." It was a flimsy, pathetic strategy, but it was all he had. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the ship sailed smoothly through the darkening water. Ava Rostova watched her captain, who had returned to her duties with an unnerving placidity. She hadn't mentioned the announcement or shown any sign of distress. But Ava had seen the passenger manifest. She had seen the name Vance next to the most expensive suite on the ship. She wasn't sure of the details, but she knew a storm was brewing, and it had nothing to do with the weather. "Captain," Ava said gently, "the welcome gala begins at 20 hours. Will you be attending the pre-reception with the senior staff?" Catherine turned from the window, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting second, Ava saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a deep, profound hurt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. "Of course, Commander," Catherine said, her voice perfectly even. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Have my dress uniform pressed and ready. I want to look my best when I greet our passengers." Her gaze drifted back to the dark ocean. She knew Leo and his companion would be agonizing over what to do. She knew they would feel the walls of their luxurious prison closing in, and she knew that tonight, at the gala, they would be forced to face her. The unveiling was over. The confrontation was about to begin. She would not be the wronged wife. She would be the captain, in full command, on her terms. The Starlight Ballroom was a spectacle of polished brass, gleaming crystal, and deep mahogany. A 10-piece orchestra played classic show tunes as waiters weaved through the well-dressed crowd with trays of champagne and intricate canapes. The room buzzed with the cheerful, unburdened energy of people on vacation. For Leo and Tiffany, it felt like a funeral procession, and they were the guests of honor. Leo's tuxedo felt like a straitjacket, the bow tie choking him. He had sweated through his first shirt while dressing. Tiffany stood beside him in a slinky, backless, crimson dress that, on any other night, would have made him feel like the luckiest man alive. Tonight, it felt like a garish costume, a beacon of their indiscretion. They had found a small table in a dimly lit corner, hoping to be swallowed by the shadows, but the ballroom was so brightly lit they felt utterly exposed. "Just one drink, then we leave," Leo muttered, downing his champagne in a single gulp and immediately grabbing another from a passing tray. "Stop it, you look terrified," Tiffany hissed, her own smile a brittle, painted-on facade. "You need to get a grip. You said to act normal. This isn't normal." But there was nothing normal about this. Every time the ballroom doors opened, Leo's heart leaped into his throat. He scanned the crowd, a nervous wreck, looking for a glimpse of her. He felt like a condemned man waiting for the executioner. Then, a hush fell over the room. The orchestra leader tapped his stand, and all eyes turned to the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers, "may I present the senior officers of the MS Serenity and your captain, Catherine Mercer." The orchestra struck up a regal, welcoming tune. One by one, the senior officers descended the staircase in their immaculate dress uniforms, smiling and waving to the applauding passengers. And then, at the top of the stairs, she appeared. Catherine was a vision of command. Her white dress uniform was tailored to perfection, adorned with her medals and golden epaulets. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant chignon, and her face, under the soft lights of the chandeliers, was poised and serene. She descended the stairs with a grace and confidence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. She wasn't just an officer. She was royalty. Leo felt Tiffany's nails dig into his arm. He couldn't breathe. This was not the woman he had left in their quiet suburban home. This was not the tired, distracted wife who spoke of cargo manifests. This was a powerful, formidable woman who commanded 100,000-ton vessel and the unwavering respect of 1,000 crew members. He had never seen her like this. He had never truly understood the scope of her world, and in that moment, he had never felt smaller. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. It was only for a second, but it was enough. He saw no anger, no hatred, no tears. He saw nothing but a calm, cool assessment. The same look she might give a distant storm cloud on the horizon. It was a look of utter, chilling indifference, and it terrified him more than any screaming match could have. She broke eye contact first, turning her attention to the guests, smiling warmly as she shook hands with an elderly couple. She began to work the room, accompanied by her first officer, moving with an effortless poise. She was the consummate host, laughing, chatting, and putting everyone at ease. Everyone but him. Leo watched her slow, deliberate path through the ballroom, a path that was inexorably, tortuously, leading directly to their dark corner. He wanted to run, to bolt from the room, but his feet were cemented to the floor. "She's coming over here," Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Leo, do something." But what could he do? He was paralyzed. Finally, she stood before their table. First Officer Rostova stood a respectful pace behind her, her expression neutral, but her eyes missing nothing. The cheerful music of the orchestra seemed to fade into a distant hum. "Good evening," Catherine said, her voice as smooth and cool as the champagne in her hand. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed entirely on Tiffany. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Captain Mercer. Welcome aboard my ship." Tiffany, caught off guard, stammered, Tiffany Monroe. It's a beautiful ship, Captain. We're proud of her. Catherine replied, her smile never reaching her eyes. Then, and only then, did she turn her gaze to Leo. It was like being pinned by a searchlight. "Leonard, what a surprise. I wasn't aware your leadership conference was a maritime affair this year." The polite public cruelty of the remark was a physical blow. He felt the blood rush to his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was a fish, gasping for air on the deck. It was a last-minute change," he finally managed, the lie so flimsy it was insulting. "I see," Catherine said, her tone implying she saw everything with perfect clarity. She took a small sip of her drink, her eyes never leaving his. "Well, I certainly hope the company is to your liking." She glanced pointedly at Tiffany, then back at him. "You've booked the Grand Astoria suite. An excellent choice. It has a wonderful view of the ship's wake, all the things you're leaving behind." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, coated in a poison of politeness that made it impossible for him to react without causing a scene. He was being dismantled, piece by piece, in full view of everyone, yet no one could see the blade. "You'll find we run a very tight ship here, Leonard," she continued, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. For his ears only. "Everything is logged. Everything is noted. There are no secrets at sea. Remember that." She gave him one last, lingering look, a look that stripped him of all his self-importance and left him feeling like a foolish, errant child. Then she turned her brilliant, false smile back on. "Well, I must continue my rounds. Do enjoy the rest of your evening." She gave a slight nod. "Miss Munro." And with that, she was gone, gliding away to greet other passengers, leaving Leo and Tiffany in a bubble of stunned, humiliated silence. The orchestra swelled, the chatter returned, but their world had been irrevocably shattered. The confrontation was over. The psychological warfare had just begun. The MS Serenity became a prison of paradise. Every luxury, the gourmet restaurants, the sparkling pools, the vibrant casino, felt tainted, imbued with the spectre of Catherine's authority. Leo and Tiffany were no longer on a romantic getaway. They were inmates in a floating panopticon, constantly under surveillance. Catherine never sought them out again directly. She didn't have to. Her power was ambient, woven into the very fabric of the ship's daily life. When they went to the formal dining room, they found themselves seated at the worst table, tucked away near the noisy clatter of the kitchen doors. When they booked a couple's massage at the spa, their appointment was regrettably lost due to a system glitch. Their room service was always inexplicably late, and their cabin steward seemed to clean their suite only at the most inconvenient times, forcing them out onto their balcony, where they felt watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. These were small, petty inconveniences, impossible to prove as deliberate acts of malice, but their cumulative effect was suffocating. Leo knew it was her, a silent, methodical campaign of psychological attrition. He saw her from a distance sometimes, standing on a wing of the bridge, observing the passengers below, or walking the promenade deck with her senior officers. She never acknowledged him, her gaze always sweeping past him, as if he were just another piece of deck furniture. Her indifference was a far crueler punishment than her anger would have been. The ship's crew, loyal to their captain, became instruments of his torment. Their service remained professional, but there was a new, subtle edge to it. The bartenders seemed to take longer to serve him. The waiters met his eyes with a knowing pity that made his skin crawl. He could feel the whispers that followed them as they walked through the public areas. He didn't know how the story had spread. Perhaps a knowing glance from a senior officer, a bit of gossip from the bridge, but he had no doubt that the crew knew. They were the couple in 14-1, the captain's cheating husband and his mistress. They were a scandal, a cautionary tale. Tiffany was not handling the pressure well. The glamorous, carefree woman who had boarded the ship in Miami had been replaced by a tense, irritable stranger. The fantasy had been brutally punctured, and she was left with the grim reality of the situation. "Everyone is staring at us," she complained, as they sat by the adult-only pool, trying to pretend they were having a good time. "That woman over there has been looking at us and whispering to her friend for 10 minutes. "You're being paranoid," Leo snapped, though he knew she was right. "I'm not being paranoid, Leo. This is a nightmare," she retorted, her voice a low, angry hiss. "Your wife is toying with us. She's making our lives miserable, and you're just sitting here, letting her do it." "What do you want me to do, Tiffany?" he shot back, his own nerves frayed to the breaking point. "March up to the bridge and demand she stop? She's the captain. She could have me put in the brig if she wanted to." He wasn't entirely sure if cruise ships still had brigs, but the image was terrifyingly vivid. Their days took on a miserable routine. They would wake up late, have a tense breakfast in their suite, and then try to find some secluded corner of the ship where they could avoid the judgmental eyes of the crew and other passengers. The beautiful Caribbean ports of call, St. Martin, St. Thomas, offered little respite. Even on land, surrounded by thousands of other tourists, they felt like fugitives, expecting to see Catherine's steely gaze around every corner. Halfway through the cruise, a squall hit the ship. It wasn't a dangerous storm, but it was strong enough to create rough seas. The vessel began to pitch and roll, and an announcement was made for passengers to remain in their cabins or seated in the main lounges. From their suite, Leo and Tiffany watched the dark, churning waves slam against their balcony doors. The ship groaned and creaked, sounds that were deeply unsettling to a landlubber like Leo. He felt a primal fear, a complete loss of control. He was at the mercy of the storm and at the mercy of the one person who could navigate them through it. Just then, Catherine's voice came over the intercom, the same calm, reassuring tone from the first night. "Good afternoon, passengers. This is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing some inclement weather, with winds gusting up to 40 knots. Please be assured that this is well within the operating capabilities of the MS Serenity. I and my experienced bridge team are monitoring the situation closely, and I have adjusted our course to minimize the discomfort. The worst of the weather should pass within the next 2 hours. In the meantime, please exercise caution when moving about the ship." Hearing her voice, so steady and competent amidst the chaos, was the final humiliation. While he was cowering in his cabin, she was up on the bridge, fighting the storm, commanding the elements, responsible for the lives of 3,000 souls. She was magnificent, and he was nothing. A stowaway, a pathetic secret. Tiffany looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and contempt. "She's in complete control, isn't she?" she said, the words a quiet admission of defeat. He could only nod. The last embers of Tiffany's attraction to him were being extinguished by the storm. She had been drawn to his power, his confidence, his success in the corporate world. But on this ship, his world meant nothing. He was powerless, a cuckolded husband being taught a slow, brutal lesson by a wife he had fatally underestimated. The whispers on the water had become a roar, and it was the sound of his life capsizing. The storm passed, leaving behind calm seas and a permanently altered emotional landscape in Suite 1401. The illusion of their affair, once so glittering and potent, was now a waterlogged wreck. For Tiffany, the cruise had become an excruciating exercise in public humiliation. The man she had admired, the powerful partner who promised her the world, had been reduced to a nervous, defeated shell. Her breaking point came on the 5th day, during a disastrous dinner at the ship's exclusive specialty restaurant, a place they had paid a hefty surcharge to attend. They were seated next to a table of senior officers, including Ava Rostova. The officers were polite, but their presence was an oppressive weight. Every bite of food tasted like cardboard. "I can't do this anymore, Leo," Tiffany said, pushing her plate of barely touched lobster away. Her voice was flat, devoid of its earlier fire. "This is over." Leo looked up, startled. "What are you talking about? We just have to get through 2 more days." "No, we don't have to do anything," she corrected him. "I am done. This whole thing, it was a mistake. I see that now." She looked at him, her eyes clear and cold. "You told me she didn't care. You told me your marriage was a formality. You lied to me. You're terrified of her. And frankly, seeing you like this, it's not attractive." The words were a brutal, final blow to his already shattered ego. "Tiffany, please, don't," she cut him off. "I'm going to go talk to her." Leo stared at her, horrified. "Are you insane? You can't do that. What would you even say?" "I'm going to appeal to her, woman to woman," Tiffany said, a naive determination in her eyes. "I'll tell her I made a mistake, that I was misled. I'll apologize. Maybe she'll have some decency and let me off this floating hellhole at the next port." Before Leo could protest further, she stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked resolutely out of the restaurant. He was left alone at the table, the sympathetic stares of the ship's officers burning into his back. Tiffany, using a combination of charm and desperation, managed to get a message to the bridge, requesting a brief, private word with the captain. She was told to wait in a small, sterile officers' lounge near the command center. After 20 minutes that felt like an eternity, the door opened and Captain Catherine Mercer entered. She was still in her working uniform, her face impassive. She didn't sit down. "You have 5 minutes, Miss Monroe," Catherine said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Tiffany swallowed hard, her carefully rehearsed speech suddenly feeling foolish. "Captain Mercer, Catherine, I wanted to apologize for everything. I was wrong. Leo, Mr. Vance, he told me things about your marriage. He misled me." Catherine listened without a single flicker of emotion. Her silence was more intimidating than any outburst would have been. "Are you finished?" she asked when Tiffany trailed off. Yes. I just want to get off this ship. I want to go home. If you could just let me disembark at Nassau tomorrow." Catherine took a step closer, her blue eyes pinning Tiffany in place. "Let me be very clear, Miss Monroe. My marriage and what my husband told you are of no concern to me. You are a passenger on my vessel, and you entered into a personal arrangement with another passenger. That is your business." However, her voice dropped, taking on a razor's edge. "You have made it my business by conducting this affair on my ship. You have created a situation that is a distraction and a potential disruption to the good order of this vessel." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I am not interested in your apologies or your excuses. I am interested only in resolution. So here is my offer. At Nassau, a private tender will be waiting at 8 hours. It will take you to the shore. From there, you will be escorted to the airport, where a one-way ticket to Miami in your name will be waiting for you. You will take your handbag, and that is all. The rest of your luggage will be sent to your home address. You will not speak to my husband again. You will not attempt to contact him. In return, I will consider this matter concluded." Tiffany stared at her, stunned by the cold, logistical efficiency of the proposal. There was no negotiation, no discussion. It was a command. "And if I don't agree?" Tiffany asked weakly, A small, humorless smile touched Catherine's lips. "Then you will remain on this ship until we return to Miami. But I can assure you, Miss Monroe, the final 48 hours of your journey will be profoundly unpleasant." There was no choice. "I agree," Tiffany whispered. "Excellent," Catherine said, her tone all business. "Be at gangway C at 07. Sort of sharp." She turned and left without another word. When Tiffany returned to the suite, she found Leo pacing anxiously. She told him about the conversation, about the offer. He listened, his face crumbling with each word. "You're just going to leave?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You're just going to leave me here, alone?" "This was never about us, Leo," she said, her voice filled with a final, weary pity. "This was about you and her. I was just a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. Goodbye." She spent the night on the sofa. The next morning, Leo, driven by a desperate, last-ditch effort to salvage some semblance of control, did the one thing he should never have done. He took a crew-only elevator and made his way up to the bridge. When he found the door, he hammered on it with his fists. "Catherine, we need to talk! Open this door!" The door was opened instantly by two burly security officers. Ava Rostova stood behind them, her face a mask of cold fury. "Mr. Vance, this is a restricted area," Ava said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Access to the navigational bridge is strictly forbidden for all passengers. You are compromising the safety of this vessel." "I need to speak to my wife," he yelled, trying to push past them. From inside the bridge, Catherine's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Commander Rostova, the passenger seems to be disoriented and is causing a security issue. Please escort him back to his suite and confine him there until further notice. He is to have no access to any of the ship's bars or lounges. Post a guard at his door." "Yes, Captain," Ava said. Leo's frantic struggles were useless against the two security men. They dragged him away, a babbling, humiliated mess, down the sterile crew corridors. He had played his last card and lost spectacularly. He was no longer just a passenger. He was a prisoner, confined to the very suite that was supposed to have been his love nest, a testament to his spectacular, catastrophic failure. The final day of the cruise was a long, silent torment for Leo. He was a captive in his opulent suite, with a polite but unyielding security guard stationed outside his door. The champagne was gone, replaced by bottles of complimentary water. The vibrant life of the ship, the music, the laughter, the announcements for bingo and trivia, filtered through the door as distant, mocking echoes of a world he was no longer a part of. He tried to watch television, but his mind couldn't focus. He stood on his balcony for hours, watching the endless blue of the ocean, feeling his insignificance in its vastness. Tiffany was gone. He had watched her from the balcony at 8 a.m. sharp, a small, lonely figure climbing into a waiting boat and speeding away towards the Nassau shore, disappearing from his life as quickly as she had entered it. He was utterly, completely alone. The humiliation was a physical ache in his chest. He replayed the entire week in his mind, a slideshow of his own arrogance and stupidity. He had seen Catherine as a predictable, distant part of his life, a fixture he could easily manage and deceive. He had never truly seen her, the formidable intellect, the steely discipline, the quiet strength that allowed her to command the respect of 1,000 people and guide a vessel the size of a skyscraper through the world's oceans. He hadn't just cheated on his wife, he had fundamentally disrespected the very core of who she was, and she had responded by reminding him, in no uncertain terms, of his own irrelevance in her world. As the MS Serenity sailed into the port of Miami in the early morning light, the sight of the familiar skyline brought no relief, only a sense of finality. His sham of a life was over. The game was up. An hour after the ship had docked and the noisy bustle of disembarking passengers had begun, there was a sharp knock on his door. It wasn't the guard. He opened it to find First Officer Ava Rostova. "The captain will see you now," she said, her expression unreadable. "Follow me." She led him not down to the gangway, but up through a series of private corridors to the captain's personal quarters. The suite was spacious but Spartan, decorated with nautical charts and framed photos of ships, not family. It was a room that belonged to a captain, not a wife. Catherine was standing by the large porthole, looking out at the port. She was no longer in her dress whites, but in the same kind of practical navy blue uniform she wore on the bridge. She didn't turn when he entered. "You are the last passenger on board, Leonard," she said, her voice quiet but resonant in the silent room. "I had you held so we could have this conversation without an audience." She finally turned to face him. Her face was tired, the mask of command laid aside, revealing the woman beneath. He saw the hurt there, finally, but it was overshadowed by an immense, unshakable strength. "I won't ask you why," she said. "I've spent enough nights alone at sea to understand loneliness, and enough time on land to understand betrayal. The why doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happens now." Leo found his voice, a weak, hoarse thing. "Kate, I am so sorry. I never—" "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare. Your apologies are as worthless as your lies. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught in the most spectacularly humiliating way possible." He couldn't deny it. He fell silent. "When I get home in 2 days, after my duties here are complete," she continued, her voice clinical and precise, "I expect your things to be gone. The house is in my name. It was mine before we married. You will find your belongings packed and in a storage unit, the key to which my lawyer will forward to yours. He will also be forwarding the divorce papers. I will be generous, far more generous than you deserve, on the condition that you sign them without contest. No arguments, no delays. A clean break." She walked to her desk and picked up a single sheet of paper. "This is a statement. It confirms that your confinement to your quarters was a result of a security breach on the bridge and your subsequent belligerent behavior. It makes no mention of our personal relationship. You will sign it. It will protect the cruise line, and it will give you a semi-plausible reason for your conduct, should anyone ask." She held it out to him. It was his final indignity, signing a document that legally codified his own pathetic downfall. He took the pen with a trembling hand and signed his name. "Good," she said, taking the paper back. "Now you can go." He stood there for a moment, a lifetime of memories, both good and bad, flashing through his mind. He looked at this incredible, powerful woman he had so carelessly thrown away, and felt a loss so profound it was a physical void. "Kate, for what it's worth," he began. "It's worth nothing, Leonard," she said, her voice softening just a fraction, not with pity, but with finality. "Goodbye." He turned and walked out of the room, escorted by Ava Rostova, down to the empty gangway. As he stepped onto the solid ground of the port, he felt unsteady, as if the world were still rocking beneath his feet. He looked back up at the magnificent ship, at the distant, tinted windows of the bridge where he knew she would soon be, and he understood. He had dropped his anchor in another woman's harbour, only to find that his wife was the master of the entire ocean. And so, Leonard Vance walked away, not just from a ship, but from a life he had single-handedly destroyed. Captain Catherine Mercer's story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to reclaiming your own narrative. She didn't crumble in the face of betrayal. She used the very authority and discipline her husband resented, to take back control of her life, proving that the greatest strength isn't found in avoiding storms, but in learning how to command your vessel right through them. Her journey from a wronged wife to the undisputed master of her own destiny is a reminder that we all have a captain's strength within us. If you were moved by Catherine's incredible story of resilience and empowerment, please let us know in the comments below. What would you have done in her situation? We love hearing your thoughts. And if you want more stories of justice, drama, and personal triumph, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. Thank you for listening.